Well, greetings, everybody. My name is James. I am from the internet, and today we are going to be talking about the things we were told as children that are unavoidable. Now, I know when I was growing up, there were many slogans and tales and axioms that echoed through my house from generations of relatives. They had some pretty wild ones, let me tell you. But the one that stuck with me earliest and the longest was that the only two unavoidable things in life are death and taxes. Well, turns out my relatives were mostly right. Death, you know, it's a looming specter. Nobody's come up with a way to avoid it or get away from it yet. But paying taxes, well, turns out paying taxes is actually avoidable if you have enough money. So what I want to talk about today is a new report that came out detailing just how little in taxes the ultra wealthy actually pay, as well as discussing the history of taxation and income tax versus wealth tax, so that you know exactly how we got to this point. And then maybe, I don't know, we'll close with a few suggestions as to how to minimize the horrible effect of yet another thing going on in our country that majorly affects the working class while the ultra wealthy just sail on by on their 600-foot-long yachts that have another yacht parked underneath them. Here we go. Wow, look at that. It's like the Mount Rushmore of people who don't pay shit in taxes. We might as well memorialize them because they're that fucking famous, right? The secret IRS files, trove of never-before-seen records reveal how the wealthiest avoid income tax. Oh, wow. I see this one's definitely going to be the feel-good article of the summer, so I'm going to get my popcorn and my oversized Pepsi and kick back while I read this, because the only thing that's going to save me from flying into a rage-induced state is some sort of short-term diabetic coma. In 2007, Jeff Bezos, then a multi-billionaire and now the world's richest man, did not pay a penny in federal income taxes. He achieved the feat again in 2011. In 2018, Tesla founder Elon Musk, the second richest person in the world, also paid no federal income taxes. Michael Bloomberg managed to do the same in recent years. Billionaire investor Carl Icahn did it twice. George Soros paid no federal income tax 3 years in a row. Well, shit. That's quite the opening. 2 brief points before I continue here. Number one, Elon Musk was actually not a founder of Tesla. When he bought the company, he paid extra money to the actual founders, and they in turn signed over the title of founder to Elon Musk. Elon Musk didn't found shit. And number two, hey, George Soros, really? No income taxes 3 years in a row? I've been out covering protests for what, 10, 11 years now? I am still waiting for my Soros check that I keep hearing you send out to all the super soldiers who go out and buy soup for their family with their own money. So I'm just saying, if you're really paying no taxes, bro, just remember this guy, okay? I appreciate you. So ProPublica got their hands on a shit ton of IRS docs, including exactly what tax returns look like for the wealthiest of all Americans over the last 15 years or so. And surprise, surprise, no matter how little you thought they might pay in taxes, they pay far less. The report shows not just their income and taxes, but also their investments, stock trades, gambling winnings, and even the results of audits. Taken together, all the data demolishes the cornerstone myth of the American tax system, that everyone pays their fair share, and that the richest Americans pay the most. The IRS records show that the wealthiest can, perfectly legally, pay income taxes that are only a tiny fraction of the hundreds of millions, if not billions, their fortunes grow every single year. Many Americans live paycheck to paycheck, amassing little wealth and paying the federal government a percentage of their income that rises if they earn more. In recent years, the median American household has earned about $70,000 annually and paid 14% in federal taxes. The highest income tax rate, 37%, kicked in this year for couples on earnings above $628,000. However, it turns out the ultra-wealthy, they don't pay even close to 14%. So before we take a look at just how ludicrously horrible this system is, how about we go back in time real quick and I explain to you how we ended up with income tax in the first place, and then how, as with most things in the United States of America, the ultra-wealthy found a way to use the power garnered by all their wealth to warp whatever the intention of a system was, to insulate themselves away from whatever laws and financial burdens affect the poors, the working people. You. The idea of a regular tax on income, much less on wealth, does not appear in the country's founding documents. In fact, Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution explicitly prohibits direct taxes on citizens under most circumstances. This meant that for decades, the U.S. government mainly funded itself through indirect taxes, tariffs and levies on consumer goods like tobacco and alcohol. You know, you kind of got to be a little careful with how you drop taxes on people who just finished beating the shit out of another country because the country made them pay taxes. With the cost of the Civil War looming, Congress imposed a national income tax in 1861. The wealthy helped force its repeal soon after the war ended because, well, of course they did. The wealthy don't stay wealthy spending their money. They stay wealthy spending your money. By the late 19th and early 20th century, wealth inequality was acute and the political climate was changing. The federal government began expanding, creating agencies to protect food, workers, and more. It needed funding, but tariffs were pinching regular Americans more than the rich. The Supreme Court had rejected an 1894 law that would have created an income tax, so Congress moved to amend the Constitution with the 16th Amendment in 1913 that gave the government power to, quote, lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived. And of course, as the writers of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all the amendments to it usually do, they wrote this shit poorly and loopholes appeared. In the early years, of course, it worked as intended. Falling squarely on the richest in 1918, only 15% of American families owed any tax. The top 1% paid 80% of the revenue raised. But a question remained. What would count as income and what wouldn't? In 1916, a woman named Myrtle McComber received a dividend for her Standard Oil of California shares. She owed taxes thanks to the new law. The dividend did not come in cash, however. It came in the form of an additional share for every 2 shares she already held. She paid the taxes and then brought a court challenge. Yes, she'd gotten a bit richer, but she hadn't received any money, and therefore she argued she received no income. 4 years later, surprise, surprise, the Supreme Court agreed. In Eisner v. McComber, the High Court ruled that income derived only from proceeds. A person needed to actually sell an asset, stock, bond, or building and reap some money before it could be taxed. Since then, the concept that income comes only from proceeds when gains are, quote, realized has been the bedrock of the U.S. tax system. Wages are taxed. Cash dividends are taxed. Gains from selling assets are taxed. But if a taxpayer hasn't sold anything, there is no income and therefore no tax. And this is essentially what got us to where we are today. The ultra wealthy pay no taxes on their wealth. Their wealth just accrues, but it hasn't been realized until they exchange it for fiat currency or put it in a bank. So essentially, billionaires keep stocking up resources and their wealth continues to increase even though they have no income. And then what they do with their billions of dollars in wealth is they constantly take out loans from the bank and they spend the bank's money to do investments and try stuff. And if they lose all that money, well then, They pay it out of their own pocket until the end of the year, and then when they go to fill out their taxes, they write out a loss. And well, they end up getting a tax credit for all that. And basically, it's just one way to end up not paying taxes by throwing money away on frivolous dreams and idiotic ideas and grandiose concepts that come to the mind of old white billionaires who know that they can't live forever but somehow want to immortalize themselves anyway because that's what egomaniacal powerful douchebags do. Now, would you like to find out just how little those aforementioned egomaniacal douchebags pay in taxes? Cool, I'm gonna tell you. ProPublica undertook an analysis that has never been done before. They compared how much in taxes the 25 richest Americans paid each year to how much Forbes estimated their wealth grew in that same time period, to come up with a true tax rate. The results are stark. You know, like Tony Stark. Billions of dollars, lots of government contracts, playboy, don't care attitude, and of course, very little tax liability. According to Forbes, those 25 people saw their net worth rise a collective $400 billion from 2014 to 2018. They paid a total of $13.6 billion in federal income taxes in those 5 years. That's a staggering sum, but it amounts to a true tax rate of 3.4%. Wow, imagine only paying 3% tax. Man, I would love to learn how to do that. Hey, ProPublica, I'm a middle class, working class sort of fellow. How do I make that happen for myself? Let's see. Oh! It's a completely different picture for the middle class Americans. For example, wage earners in the early 40s who have amassed a typical amount of wealth for people their age. From 2014 to 2018, such households saw their net worth expand by about $65,000 after taxes on average. Mostly due to the rise in the value of their homes, you know, the ones that own homes. But because the vast bulk of their earnings were salaries, their tax bills were almost as much, nearly $62,000 over that 5-year period. Wait a minute, whoa. And here's a handy dandy little graphic for you showing you just how little in taxes all these high net worth wealthy people paid comparative to how much their wealth grew. Please note, their wealth grows at about 100 times the rate their income does. They purposely don't take an income. They don't take a salary. Ergo, there's very little to tax them on. As long as they don't sell shares of the stock in their company and they don't take an income, they effectively pay dick in taxes. As far back as 2007, Jeff Bezos, who filed his taxes jointly with his wife, reported a paltry $46 million in income, largely from interest and dividend payments on outside investments. He was able to offset every penny he earned with losses from side investments and various deductions, like interest expenses on debts and the vague catch-all category of other expenses. Yeah, I tried to file some other expenses one year. The IRS sent me a letter. It turns out other expenses isn't that othery. I mean, it's othery if you're ridiculously wealthy, but if you're a working class person, not so much, because they know you don't have other expenses because you have no fucking money to buy things. In 2011, a year in which his wealth held roughly steady at $18 billion, Bezos filed his tax return reporting he lost money. His income that year was more than offset by investment losses. What's more, because according to the tax law, he made so little, he even claimed and received a $4,000 tax credit for his children. That's right. Jeff Bezos paid negative taxes. I can't make this up, people. I can't make this up. His tax avoidance is even more striking if you examine 2006 to 2018, a period for which ProPublica has complete data. Bezos' wealth increased by $127 billion, according to Forbes, but he reported a total of $6.5 billion in income. The $1.4 billion he paid in personal federal taxes is a massive number, yet it amounts to a 1.1% true tax rate. Also, this is the part of the show where I remind you that Amazon ran at a loss for 20 years, 2 decades. Every single year, the company ran at a loss. It stayed afloat because of outside investors, granted, but also because they got massive subsidies, massive tax breaks, and massive contracts from the United States government. They were, for all intent and purpose, a welfare company. They ran at a negative, they received handouts, and that was how Jeff Bezos accrued his wealth. He didn't use bootstraps. He used a $300,000 loan from his mom to start getting government grants and tax credits from the government to fucking sell books through the mail. But bootstraps, people, bootstraps. It's all you need, bootstraps and a check from mommy and 20 years of hands-on government intervention. But bootstraps, people. And now, before we close, I would like to get to one more very important point. For all the Muppets out there who are going to clog up the comment section, screaming that even though the wealthy only pay 1%, they still pay more than other people do, ha ha ha, I am going to bring to you something called facts. So strap in there, Muppets. This one's for you. The consequences of allowing the most prosperous to game the tax system have been profound. Federal budgets, apart from military spending, have been constrained for decades because it's not like we're going to constrain military spending. How the fuck do you think we leverage our military power to acquire resources for American corporations dirt cheap? I assure you it's not our winning personality, but I digress. Let me continue. Roads and bridges have crumbled, social services have withered, and the solvency of Social Security and Medicare is perpetually in question. There's an even more fundamental issue than which programs get funded or not. Taxes are a kind of collective sacrifice. No one loves giving their hard-earned money to the government, but the system works only as long as it's perceived to be fair. No. The system is tolerated only as long as it's perceived to be fair, and it has not been perceived to be fair for decades, so guess what? Looks like the system's working just as intended. Our analysis of tax data for the 25 richest Americans quantifies just how unfair the system has become. By the end of 2018, the 25 wealthiest Americans were worth $1.1 trillion. For comparison, it would take 14.3 million ordinary American wage owners put together to equal that same amount of wealth. The personal federal tax bill for the top 25? $1.9 billion. The bill for the wage earners? $143 billion. So what can you do? Well, other than the participatory democracy part of finding people to run for office, then supporting their campaign, then getting them to promise to run on a platform of tax fairness, and then assuming you can get them elected, holding their feet to the fire for decades as they try to make that happen and build up a large enough voting bloc, what can you do besides that over the 20 to 40 years it'll take to possibly get enough people into office to block the worst of proposed tax bills? Well, I would say it's time to start looking into more co-ops, both living and business. More business, more so than living, because living co-ops and apartment buildings that get bought out by the residents eventually become just as bougie as new construction. However, true workplace democracy that can be founded through co-ops, that is very powerful. So to all of you out there who are in social media land and you see all those wealthy blue checkmark lefty people who, love to get social media clout by getting thousands of retweets on their edgelord suggestions to all their followers on the Twitter sphere, hey, I got an idea. Why don't you start asking those people to put their money where their mouth is? Maybe, I don't know, fund some co-op growth. Put some starter cash in the pile. Yeah. Maybe give people the opportunity to buy the businesses from their bosses as they go to sell them with some kind of small, low-tier payment plan. Why not fund the cooperative business culture so we can start to get away from this sort of madness? Because if the only people any of us can work for are corporations and apps, well then our lives are being controlled by a few thousand people interlocked on a few hundred companies, boards of directors who spend money lobbying 500 people in Washington. Frankly, we've been doing that for a long time, and that's how we got here. So let's start off with the ask from our lefty thought leaders, because after this, my suggestions, they start to become a lot less palatable to a lot more of the masses. Let's go with this one, people, see where it brings us. Until next time, my name is James. I'm from the internet and I'm out. Peace.